The beauty of the tRPC is basically the client and server share the same type automatically. So I'm going to show you the real example in here. This is basically task manager simple application. And then on the server side, basically I make sure that the input, it should be string and minimal 1, right? And in here I send that title is basically string, right? So for example, I send the title like maybe number 123, and now as you can see, this automatically gives this error. That's super nice. And for example, on the server, I create function like create task, right? If I save that, now as you can see, the client is break. Now there is an error in here, like I cannot access the create because there's no create function. This is basically create task. So let's just remove that again. So that's what we're going to learn. And I just want to show you the beauty about this tRPC. And we're going to create just a really simple application. And hopefully you will understand why this tRPC is great. First, we need to generate brand new Next.js application. I'm going to call that Next tRPC. So anyway, I don't want to waste your time. So that's why I just want to copy and paste this UI right here. This is basically super simple. I have component called task list inside a component folder. And as you can see, we have two state in here. Task, this is basically the list of the task, and just title. That's just one input we have. And in here, as you can see, we have the form, right? If I submit the form, it's basically running the handle create function, and the function now is just an empty. And also we have this on change on input. It basically will store the value on the title state. And that's it. Of course, down here we have the list of the tasks. Just map that value. And then when I click the title, it's basically running the handle toggle and sending the task.id. And then if I delete the button, of course, it's basically running the handle delete function. Super simple. And I just import that on the page right here. Now we should have this one right here. So of course, it's not going to be works for now, right? So now let's try to set up the tRPC. I'm going to go to tRPC.io, and first we have to install this package right here, tRPC server and tRPC client. I'm going to copy that, open terminal, and just paste that. So let's take a look on documentation. The first thing is we have to create the tRPC.ts file. So I'm going to copy this one right here. And basically, I like to create a server folder, and inside that I have this tRPC.ts file. And yep, I just want to copy and paste everything here. Just remove all the comment. You can just read that if you want. So anyway, this is basically just create this variable called t set equals to init tRPC.create, and then export this router, come from t.router, and then export the public procedure. Next, we need to create the index.ts file on the server folder. So let's do that, index.ts file, and then basically I just want to copy all of this. So this is basically you have to create router. So in my case, I'm going to create one router called task in here, right? Of course, you can give any name you want. And then what I'm going to put in here is basically the task router. So I'm going to create that on another folder. So I'm going to create that on the server folder. I'm going to create another folder inside that called routes. And then inside this, I'm going to create task.ts. Here we go. So what I'm going to export in here is task router. For now, let's say empty array or something like that. I just want to export that first. Let's say task router. Here we go. Now we have this error. It's fine. So let's try to working with this task router. So instead of empty array, we have to import router come from the let me see, tRPC right here. We already export that, right? So we can using that on this task router. So let's just import that. Here we go. So inside in here, we have to add some like a function, like a get all maybe. And in here, you can use the public procedure, and then you can use query. And in here, you can run a function. So for example, this function is just return task. Right, so task is basically I'm going to create task on the top in here. Let's say let tasks set equals to empty array like this. As you can see, we have this error because the type is any. So let's create the type task in here that have an ID string, title string, and completed is Boolean. So let's put the type in here, and now as you can see, the error should be gone. Now we can just using this get all function to the client. But first, if you want to using this get all, you have to create the client first. So I'm going to create folder on the root, which is lib, right? Lib slash tRPC-client.ts file. You can go back to documentation and scroll down until you see the using your new backend on the client. This is the setup, the tRPC on the client. You can just copy everything in here and paste that to the tRPC-client.ts. That's it. And of course, the app router, it should become from the server. So let's just import that, come from the add/server. That's it. And I just want to remove all the comment in here. And the URL is basically, I'm going to remove this localhost 2000 and I'm going to paste this /API/tRPC. So let's create this API on the app folder. Let's go to the app folder and I'm going to create API folder, tRPC folder, and array. Inside that we have tRPC, and then we have to close the array and then slash the row.ts file. Here we go. So what we have to put in here is, I just want to copy and paste that. So in here, we need to export the handler as a get and handler as a post. And this is basically the handler set equals to request, right? This is basically just running the fetch request handler, and the endpoint is /API/tRPC. We put the request, we also put the router. So the router, this is the important part, is basically set equals to app router. So the app router, it should become from the index that we already create on the server, this one right here. So that's why we have to export that. Cons app router and this one right here, so we can using that on the road, right? So as you can see, the error, it should be gone. So now let's try to get data, right? The data come from the server. Where is that? This one right here, right? The empty task in here, we are going to try to getting that from the client. So let's try to just close everything. We're done with all the setup. So let's go to app and then, component, task list. And in here, right, I'm going to create a async function because we're going to wait. I'm going to give a name load task. And inside this function, what we have to do. So I'm going to create a variable called data that equals to await for tRPC, right? This tRPC should become from the client. So let's go back to lib in here, tRPC client. Anyway, we have to export this, so we can using that on the component, right? Export const tRPC. So now we can using this tRPC variable in here. Await tRPC dot, we have to import that first. As you can see, dot and then task, we can access that right now, and then dot get all. As you can see, we have this function. And then let's say dot query, and then just running that like this. So now if I just console log the data, save that, and let's take a look on the browser. So of course we not see anything on the console because we're not yet running the function, right? So let's try to running that inside the use effect in here. I'm going to running this function on the first render. So let's try to see. Here we go. We have this empty array. Let's say we're adding this data in here, this object on the server, right? I just putting the ID 1, title task 1, the completed is false. So now let's see in here on the client, we already getting that, right? So let's just see the data on the console. As you can see, if I refresh, and as you can see, this is the array with this object. So that means it's successful, right? We already connecting the server with the client, because now we can get the data from the server. Of course, we can render that, right? So let's go back to task list, and what we have to do in here is, let's just say set task into the data, and now we have task value, of course, and it basically map that right here. So it basically will show the data when I refresh. As you can see, we have one task start render in here. Super nice. How about the add right here? The add is not working for now, so we can also adding the function on the task server in here. But before that, we are going to install a package called Zot. It's basically for validation the input. So I'm going to hit enter and npm install Zot. Because this is object, of course, we can add another key value on this object using comma, and then I put create. And in here, I'm going to run the public procedure, and I'm going to send this dot input. So this basically will validate the input, right? I'm going to make sure I import the z from the Zot. So basically the input, it should be, right? This title, it should be string and have minimal value 1. And also in here, I'm going to run the mutation. And inside the mutation, we can running a function, basically function like this. And inside in here, I can grab the input value by running input like this. And inside this function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable called new task, right? New task set equals to this object right here. The ID, I'm going to generate that automatically using crypto.randomuuid, and then the title, it should become from the input.title, and then the completed, by default, it should be false. And now, of course, we have to push the new task right here into the task right here, task variable, right? So we can just put task.push new task and return the new task in here. Just that's it. So now let's try to run that on the client. Here, basically, when I submit the form, it's running the handle create function. So let's try to see in here, right? This is the handle create function. So first, I'm going to make sure the browser is not reload. So that's why I'll put the e.prevent default in here. And then what we have to do is same like we're doing on the top right here, which is I'm going to await for the tRPC, right? .task .create. As you can see, now we have this create, right? And then because we need to add something on the data, of course, we are going to use mutate in here. That's it. And just paste the title set equals to title, right? The title is basically come from this state in here, and this is already a string. So let's try here. If I add new data, let's try to do that. Task 2, for example, if I click add, now nothing happened. We have to running the load task right now. After I adding new data, I have to running the load task again, because this is will getting new data and update the task state, right? So that's why in here, what I have to do is first I'm going to reset the title to empty string. And then next thing is I'm going to running the load task. This basically will load the new task, right? So let's try here. I'm going to refresh that. Now, as you can see, the data is just here. This data is basically not stored on database. Even if you refresh that, the data is still in here. It's just because the data is stored on the memory, stored on the server runtime memory. It means if I restart the server, right? If I restart the server like this, npm run dev again, now the task 2 it should be gone. As you can see, the task 2 is just gone because the task 2 is stored on the memory, right? So now how about the handle toggle? So this basically will toggle the completed value, right? And this function is like an ID in here because we send that. As you can see, just send that when I click the text. So now we can just create the toggle function in here. So let's create another key object like a toggle, for example. And again, we're running the public procedure. And then in here, I'm going to running .input, right? .input z.object. The ID that we're sending on this client, it should be string. So that's why in here, I validate the ID, it should be have z.string. And then the next thing is because we change something on the data, we have to running mutate, right? Mutation like this. And again, inside that, we can put an arrow function like this. We can grab the input. So let's grabbing that input like this. First, we need to find the tags that have same ID. So I'm going to run this const tag set equals to tags. This is the all tags that we have. And then running .find t set equals to t.id is equal to input ID that we send. And then in here, I'm going to add simple condition. If the tags doesn't have any value, just return new error tags not found. And then down here, I'm going to say tags.completed. Let's just change the value into the opposite of the value, tags.completed with this exclamation mark. And don't forget to just return the tags like this. So now we can just go back to the client and just working with this handle toggle right here. And yep, we can just await for the tRPC.task. Now we should have this toggle, right? And we can just running the mutate and just send the ID. That's it. ID set equals to ID from the props. So let's take a look at the result here. If I click that, now as you can see, nothing just happening. Because again, don't forget to running the load tags after you change something on the data. And here we go, right? So let's try that again. If I click, here we go. It works. Great. So now let's working with the delete. Of course, delete is just really easy. So let's go back to the server and let's trying to add a comma. and let's add a like delete, for example. And in here we can running the public procedure. First, I'm going to make sure that the ID should be string. So I running this dot input z.object ID should be string. And then finally, I running the mutation because we changed something on the data. Mutation, and then inside that we can put an arrow function. On the props, we can grab the input. And then finally, I'm going to change the tags variable here, the array, into new value come from the tags.filter. I just filter that with the.id is not equal the input.id, right? Just remove the ID that I click and then just return success to true. How to running that on the client? Simple. Here we can just running like we're doing on the handle toggle. Just copy that, paste it, and in here we are going to run the delete. Just that's it. Just make sure we also running the load tags after we delete that. So let's take a look. I'm going to add tags 2, hit enter. Now we have task 2, task 3, enter. We have that. And for example, I'm going to delete the tags 2, click that, and it's gone. If I click complete, it also gone. Oh, not gone, but completed. So that's it for this video. Hopefully this video not going to be too long and you can understand how tRPC work in Next.js application. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next one.